Well, this valve here, it picks up the signal that comes from the reverb output, and it's got a screen to avoid any problems with hum. It is a 12AX7 valve, or ECC83. ECC83 is the British equivalent of the American 12AX7s. That's exactly the same valve again. There is a problem sometimes with those input, because that's an input tube as well, and it's the one that picks up the signal that comes from the source. And what you get with these input tubes is that you get microphonic and hissy problems, and what you do is, if sometimes you tap them a little bit and hear whether the problem gets worse. So what I do is I do this, and then you hear through the speaker and it goes clunk, 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 and that means, well, it's had its time for replacement. This here, it's a 12AU7, but it's an American Philips 5814, 5814A, but for all intensive purposes is an American American Philips 12AU7, or the European equivalent is ECC82. Back on again. This is also a 12AU7 or 5814 American Philips, and this is also a 12AU7 or 5814 American Philips. And the last two, which are the mini power valves, and they've got a little preamp valve in them, because like you can see that the big part of it is a power section, and this little bit is another little triode. And they're part of the end of the equalizer system, and also they are the reverb driver. It's not very easy to get. It's a PCL86. I forgot what the American equivalent is. Very high quality. I think it's a Siemens, a German Siemens, but I've got plenty of those, and I think there are people who are doing this valve, and they're quite cheap, but they're very high quality. From the beginning, 12AX7,
yep.
12AX7, 12AU7, 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 PCL86, PCL86.
Brilliant.
So that's the input, that's the main input of channel 1. That's the main input of channel 2.
Yep.
This is the grounding post, which you may not have to use it. This is the reverb output. This is the reverb output for each channel, channel 1 and channel 2. But it's just reverb, nothing else but reverb. This is the reverb input for each channel. That means that the output of the spring has to go to the reverb input. And here again there are two outputs per channel. This is the master output for the channel 1, which is the bottom channel, and this is the EQ output of the channel 1. And again, this is the EQ output of channel 2 and the master output of channel 2. Finally, we've got here channel 1 and channel 2 again, and we call it reverb drive out. This is a mini power output, and it drives the spring for each channel, for channel 1 and channel 2 again.
So that's not an audio output, that's not intended.
Well,
you
get audio if you connect the speaker, but it has to be a speaker or a spring reverb input of approximately 10 ohms, 8 ohms. You shouldn't left it disconnected, because you may end up damaging the tubes. And now I'm going to start connecting.
That's great.
Right, so since we mentioned the business with a reverb drive out, let's start with that. Treat this output as if it is a speaker output of a vacuum tube amplifier. So you will recognize the leads are quite thick, and if you look at them inside, they're kind of electrical leads. They have no screen, they're just like electrical leads, like the ones that you will find in a PA system or in a guitar amp, jack to jack sort of system. So
this really has the feeling of like connecting amplification hardware rather than collecting musical instruments.
Not preamp. It's not preamp. If you try to use this as a guitar lead, for instance, it will hum because it has no shield, and that's a very important thing. And it goes like that. Channel 1 reverb drive out.
Yeah.
goes to the input of whichever spring you want to consider channel 1 or channel 2. They're both the same. So you connect this to the input of the spring.
Yep.
Now, the spring has got, like I said, an input which is like a little speaker, and it's got the output. And the output of the spring must be treated like a microphone. So is a different lead. This one is we can't open it because it's molded, but it's got a screen. It's like a microphone lead, and it has to be like a microphone lead, and you can't miss it because it's an RCA or a phono thing, and it goes from where it says output, and then you have to find for the corresponding channel the reverb input.
That's cool.
Which is there. So you see channel 1, reverb in, output of the reverb, and then again channel 1 is the output that drives it, and so you can't go wrong. You are on the same channel, because otherwise you get confused. If you put, say, if you connect it there, it will get confusing. So one channel, one spring, so to speak. And then of course you do exactly the same thing with the other channel. That is again the same thing. The output of channel 2 of the reverb drive goes to the input on the box, and then that's why I marked them red. This is red, this is red, so you can't miss them. And this is white. The output again goes here.
That's brilliant.
You connect your source here, and then you can choose, like I said, what do you want to pick up your output from. You can pick it up from the reverb output. You can pick it up equalizer or EQ out is only equalized, no spring, no reverberation. But I think the best one is the master output, because you can mix the two together.
Right.
Okay, that's it. Power supply is on. As the switch is pressed down, it illuminates, and then of course you connect the connector, the power cord is connected onto the power supply, and then the unit itself. Make sure that this switch is up, which is the standby switch, which is it's just to warm up, and then those two LEDs are on, because that means that the valves are sort of being warmed, the tubes are lighting up. And then to avoid any problems, the best thing to do is, which I explain in the manual, because of the high signals generated and blah blah blah, all the knobs down to 0, all of them, everything's 0, everything's 0. Also the master out 0. And then also the switches, the EQ switch on low, the treble switch on low, this 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 off, then this off. Those 1, 2, 3, 4 switches are the EQ section switches, which means that switches off the bass, that switches off the mid-range, the second mid-range, that switches off, the second mid-range switches off. Again, this is the treble, sorry, that was a treble, it switches off the treble, that switches off the second mid-range, that switches off the first mid-range, and that switches off the bass. And that's it really. Now it's ready to operate the unit.